All right, we are live here. Mike Jeff for Chicago Jazz Magazine, chicagojazz.com, and welcome to the Chicago Music Revealed show. I almost said the podcast, which is Chicago Audio Experience, but we'll plug that a little bit later. Thanks for joining us. I have had one heck of a morning. Hopefully you have as well. It's already 11:37, so I'm only 7 minutes late, which sometimes that's pretty good for me because it's jazz time, man. You know, we're all musicians. We're all love music. That's why we're here, Chicago Music Revealed. So every once in a while, things get a little backed up. Things get a little off time. But we are back. We are ready to rock and roll today. Had a great interview yesterday. I thought that was a lot of fun. Hopefully if you missed it, you will be able to go back and check that out on all of our platforms, because talking to Lydia Liebman, one of the leading voices in the PR movement here in the nation and internationally, just being able to talk to her about all of the different ways you can promote yourself, all of the different ins and outs of the music industry. I think we got a lot of insight yesterday. So if you didn't have a chance to listen yesterday, it's all up: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, also ChicagoMusicRevealed.com. And later this afternoon, the podcast will be up and running as well. So hopefully everyone is having a great day. Tomorrow, just a little preview, we're going to have Sean Hinton on the show. He's a musician out of Milwaukee. He's got a new project coming out. They're going to do a live stream over the weekend. They're going to launch something tomorrow. So we're going to talk to him. He's also, by the way, the guitar player for John Legend, Mary J. Blige, many other the international musicians that we all know. He's one of the guys that you see standing up on the stage next to all of them, backing them up. He's been doing that since 2004. So it's going to be a pleasure having him on the show to talk to him about all the good stuff. Congratulations to everyone doing the live streaming. It is getting better and better and better. I watched a couple of sets last night from different musicians. Of course, there's some other live streams that are coming up. Now, what we're going to do, Amanda Capitelli, who's been our sort of woman on the street, woman on the stream. I just made that up. That sounds pretty good. Woman on the stream. She's going to start doing her updates on Instagram Live on Chicago Jazz Mag. So if you go to Chicago Jazz Mag on Instagram, we're going to have her start doing Instagram Live updates probably every day or every other day, depending. If she gets flooded with requests, she's going to probably start doing them every day. So that'll be over on IG Live, Chicago Jazz Mag. Check that out. And then we're going to have her on probably once a week, maybe to fill us in on what's happening. Also want to make everyone aware that there's a lot of GoFundMe pages up running, not for musicians specifically, although there are, but for all the clubs, the restaurants, the venues, everything. So be sure to support all of the staff that's been furloughed. Just judging on what I'm hearing on the street, things are really tight for a lot of people. I mean, you know, I own Chicago Jazz Magazine, so I'm well aware of that. But it's also looking like it's going to be a longer period of time. They're not going to be opening up April 30th, these restaurants and bars. I have a high, probability that it's not going to happen. Maybe later in May, probably under capacity orders. So we need to support as many people as possible, sticking together as a community. Of course, any comments, any questions, any requests, anything you want, leave it in the comment. We had some great comments yesterday. They kept coming in throughout the entire evening, so it was fun. Got to connect with a lot of people throughout the entire country, thanks to everyone starting to share it out and stream it out. So be sure to share it. Be sure to tell a friend. As I always say, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, call the grandkids. Chicago Jazz Music, right here, Chicago Music Revealed. Now, I get to bring on a special guest. I had the honor of being on his show on Saturday on WGN, the host with the most, the host of Outside the Loop Radio. This is going to be episode 705 this Saturday. Mike Steven is joining us. Congratulations on 705, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. every Saturday morning on WGN, the big 720. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Look, here's the thing. You're a drummer, so don't ever apologize for being late because you keep the time, dude.
That's
you
right.
Keep the time.
That's right.
Everyone works around you. If you go faster, and I know this because we played in a band together like 15 years ago. If Jeff Hurst decides to go faster, we're all going faster.
It's very, it's very difficult to argue with a drummer live on stage. If he starts going faster, it's just, you don't have a choice, really. I like that. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Yes. Well, thank you for the congratulations. Yeah, 7:05 this week, and it's a labor of love.
It is. Now, before we talk a little bit about how the show got started and the background and your background and everything, let's talk a little bit about the show. Now, I was on the show on Saturday because you were focusing in on the COVID-19 as it related to the music industry and the
Mm-hmm.
entertainment industry in Chicago. I'm sure you have other features coming up as far as that goes as well. But also, I find it interesting because you're also talking to political leaders, you're talking to neighborhood people, community leaders about this current situation. I mean, your entire show is able to scope the outside the loop, meaning outside of what the mainstream normally is talking about. So you're able to get into those neighborhoods and into those smaller communities. What are you hearing from some of the different people? I know you talked to aldermen, you talked to a lot of different people. What are you hearing from them?
Well, I mean, right now it is, as you know, and you just said, it is a really difficult time. And for the last 4 weeks on Outside the Loop, we've been pretty much theming the show, talking more or less all about the COVID-19 pandemic. And like you said, the show is called Outside the Loop. So I started it because I wanted to talk about issues in Chicago that maybe weren't getting a ton of mainstream attention. Now, this is getting a lot of attention, COVID-19. So we're trying to talk to folks maybe that aren't getting as much sort of love, or that spotlight isn't on them as much. So, last week I talked to the owner of Tone Deaf Records in Portage Park, and he is now resigned to basically getting in his car and he's making deliveries. He's doing these deliveries of records of vinyl, and that's how he's getting by. When I say getting by, he's not paying the bills. I mean, he's losing money.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
it's just, to think about that like a small business. We talked about Illinois breweries, and there are a ton of breweries across the United States. Here in Chicago, it's a very competitive market. We talked about how breweries are being affected, and draft beer is essentially dead. We're not going back to that anytime soon. So now it's all curbside pickup, uh, order online.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, I'm actually talking to someone who just opened up a brewery. Not a good time to open up a brewery, but also we talked about issues of education. So I'm also a high school history teacher at Oak Park and River Forest High School, and I had some teachers on talking about this distance learning, or e-learning, or remote learning. It all pretty much means the same thing, and how that's working for students and teachers. So the common refrain that I'm hearing is it's difficult. It's also very unsettling because we haven't been down this road before, so we don't know when this is going to end. We don't know how this is going to shake out. And we're just trying to do the best we can, and we're sort of flying blind, which is pretty frustrating.
Yeah, we've talked about this on and off the air in the past week or so. I think this is going to have to rearrange a lot of people the way they've always done things. Everything's going to change from here on out,
Mm-hmm.
especially the e-learning thing. You brought up the e-learning thing. I mean, how many schools have talked about doing something like this, but haven't been able to pull the trigger? Now they have time to pull the trigger, and out of the necessity of pulling the trigger, and they're working through all the kinks. So let's talk a little bit about the e-learning side of it, since you're a history teacher.
Yep.
I mean, you obviously knew about Zoom, you knew about the e-learning platforms, but I mean, you probably were not utilizing those. Now, out of necessity, you're utilizing those. Obviously, you don't have that direct connection with the students, but do you find it can be as productive, just in a different way?
Um, kind of.
Yeah.
It's incredibly frustrating, and one of the things I've learned, just personally about myself, is that I love the job of teaching. I really love it, and one of the reasons why I love it is because I get to be with these kids every day. And so you take out that element, and it becomes very strange. It becomes, you're posting something on an electronic platform, and they'll read it, we hope, and maybe do some assignment, we hope, and turn that in. And the immediate, and I talked about this on my show, the immediate feedback that you get as a teacher, if you're in the room and you're looking around and you can kind of tell if kids aren't understanding what you're saying, or if you need to go slower, or if you need to go back and redo something, that's all gone. That's all gone.
Right.
So we're trying to do the best we can. I think I think maybe certain colleges and universities were more prepared for this because they're online classes, and to an extent we were prepared for it. But it's a lot that we have to figure out in no time.
Mm-hmm. So we should mention Outside the Loop Radio, 7:20 a.m. Every Saturday morning, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. But you also have a podcast, OutsideTheLoop.com. And if you do
OutsideTheLoopRadio.com.
OutsideTheLoopRadio.com, I apologize. But also, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, all those good stuff. It's streaming up there. You can find it. It's also on WGN's website as far as the podcast goes.
Yep.
But yeah, you bring up that point about the e-learning, and I just think that even though colleges were set up for it, I don't think they were set up for it in the extent that they have to get set up and ramped up for it now. And then you take it to another level into the entertainment industry, and we're looking at it since I'm the director of programming at the EPIPHANY Center for the Arts, which we were supposed to open up April 30th. And now we're looking at opening up whenever we can open up. There's going to be capacity limits on a lot of these clubs, a lot of these venues. The festivals are later in the summer, really still up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen with that? But I think that there's going to be another shift outside of the e-learning into the streaming, into these venues, out of the necessity of having to do something, because if there's a capacity limit, they're going to have to stream these shows live, and they're going to have to figure out how to do it, because they can't just sit dormant for months and months and months without doing something. I mean, are you hearing anything on the entertainment side? Because you talk to a lot of different club owners, a lot of different venue owners.
Yeah, this week I've got Robbie Glick from Reggie's coming up on the show, and he is someone. Reggie's is just it's a great venue, and it's over 10 years in Chicago, so a well-established venue. And we're going to talk about the struggles that he's had, because he's had to furlough all of his workers, and that stinks. And a lot of people, when you're the boss and you're giving out the paychecks, you are the person who is sort of in charge of the livelihood, in a sense, of these employees. So he's had to basically lay off everybody, and is just in a sense of stasis. I've also talked to one of the recurring segments on my show. Steve Krakow is a local artist and musician. He does a great strip in the Reader called The Secret History of Chicago Music, and he's also a DJ and is a musician and an artist, like I said. And business has dried up. I mean, he's looking for commission work online, but he can't go DJ the MCA anymore. He can't go to Sportsman's Club and take his turntables with him. That's just not happening. And he said, and this is, again, another common refrain, we don't know when this is coming back. And so the problem, I don't know if you want to use problem, but one of the problems here is that a lot of these artists are living check to check. And so when you take out their means, they're starving. And that's just the reality of it. So we look to government, we look to maybe some bailouts. I don't know. I feel like this stuff changes every day with phase 4 of this bill and whatever's going on in Congress. But something's going to happen, because I don't know what our way of life looks like after this, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to change drastically. And without getting into the weeds, I mean, I can tell you from my experience, and then also from talking to different people running a small business, trying to apply for some of these federal things. You can put it in, but they didn't supply enough money for what has to come out of it. And there's a bunch of loopholes. It's a whole thing going on. So that's going to come out in 4 or 5 months. But I mean, the fact that artists specifically, they're trying as much as they can to try to apply for different things through the federal government, through state governments. Of course, there's a lot of funding through different art foundations that they're trying to ramp up, but this thing happens so fast. I talked to so many restaurant owners that said, if they would have given us a week, we could have ran specials and gotten rid of all the food. Now we just lost all the food and had to furlough all the employees because they had to shut it down so quickly because of the spread of the virus. So, I think it's going to change a lot of things, the way we do business just in the future. And, tuning in to Outside the Loop Radio every Saturday at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., you're going to hear more and more stories like this. The thing I like about
smooth. So smooth.
I learned from the best. I learned from Mike Steven over the years how to do a transition.
Oh, so nice.
But also outside of the music industry, you're one of the only shows, I think, on air and on podcast. I mean, that we normally hear on air, that is on podcast, that really covers local, political, and small government items that get just washed over the top. So, how
Yeah.
did you end up starting Outside the Loop Radio? I know it was a podcast. You started
Yeah.
doing it. Just was it a labor of love? You wanted to do something. How did this whole thing start?
Yeah, it is. It's still a labor of love. I mean, I get paid for it now, but let's be clear. I'm not rolling around in the money here, but it's nice to get it's nice to get something for sure. And I'm
You don't
very
have a
appreciative of that.
WGN chauffeur in the morning driving you down there at 4 a.m. to get ready for the show?
Nothing that I can talk about on the air,
Oh,
so
okay,
I
I get
just
it.
wanted to
No
put that out
problem.
there.
Okay.
But you know how it is. I started this in 2006. Now, 2006, nobody knew what a podcast was. Nobody knew what a podcast was, and so what I really wanted to do is I wanted to create a show, and I've always really loved the radio medium. Ever since I was, a teenager, I just fell in love with radio. And I really am interested in community and telling stories. And I wanted to create a show that I felt was telling the stories of real issues in Chicago, maybe not the stuff that is on the front page of the paper, but stuff that you have to really dig for. And I'll say this, in 2006, there wasn't a ton of that going on. I think now, all these years later, 14 years later, there are more outlets like that. So I've had to sort of step up my game. But I actually was working at WGN as a producer back in '06, and I pitched this idea to them. I said, "Hey, it'll just be on the website." And they're like, yeah, I don't know if this is the right time for that." So I said, "Okay, well, I'm going to go do this on my own."
Right.
And I did, and I've never looked back. I haven't missed a week in 14 years. And ironically, so 6 years ago, GN calls me and says, "Hey, would you want to bring this to the airwaves of WGN?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I'm again appreciative. I love being there. It's such a storied station. So I've been podcasting for 14 years, doing this show on GN for 6 years. And, I love telling the stories of people who might not get the attention, and it doesn't mean that they're not important. They are, and that's what really makes Chicago Chicago.
Well, we should talk a little bit too, because you brought up WGN and you were producing. You produced Steve Cochran's show at one point. Obviously, Nick DiGilio's show. You're known as the Broham on Nick DiGilio's
Yeah,
show. You still
Broham.
appear as Broham every once in a while, don't you? Pop
From
on
time
there
to time. His hours got shifted to like the dead of the night,
yeah.
And so now I have two children, 5 and 2, and so with Tichy, that's a little difficult these days.
And you also did Lou Manfredini's show. You were producing Lou
Yep.
Manfredini's show, and I know that you're real close with Rick Kogan over there. So I mean, you had that it was more than you kind of producing a show once in a while. You were there. You were on staff. You came out of college doing that, didn't you?
Yeah, pretty much. I graduated Loyola University in '02, and I had an internship there when I was a senior, and then I was hired on as a producer. And I was there from, '01, '02 till about 2007. Met my wife there, so that's very cool. She's no longer there. She was in the promotions department. But so it was that experience was great because I learned so much. There were so many people who were willing to help you out, to talk with you. And really, if I have any advice for younger people coming up in this business, is that you just have to do it. You can't be concerned with, "Oh, I'm going to be famous or I'm going to have so many people listen." You just got to be prepared when you start out. No one's listening. And that was certainly the case when I did this. And so keep doing it because you'll make your mistakes. Maybe nobody hears them. Awesome. Keep going until, it took me 8 years before I got the call that I was basically waiting for from WGN.
Well,
So,
and you weren't pushing WGN to get on there. They just
no.
things were changing over there, and when things changed, the right person at the right time came in and said, "We need to add some local programming." Well, why don't we talk to Mike, because he's already got this show happening. It sounds quality. We can just bring it right in, and it's those types of things. And it's the same as with music. I mean, when you and I were in that band, we started playing, and we were playing to like 3 or 4 people, and the next thing we know, there's 7 of us on an RV traveling all throughout the Midwest every weekend, selling out gigantic places and opening up for Rusted Root and everywhere else.
House of Blues, yeah.
House of Blues, yeah, and but you start out because it's you want to do something, you want to create something, and it grows. I think a lot of people, and you tell me, because when you came out of college, you were a little bit different, but I'm sure you were in college with people that were thinking this way. They get out and they're like, okay, well, I need to get I've got a journalism degree or a
Mm-hmm.
broadcasting degree. I need to make, 40 grand a year here. I can't go work for interns somewhere. I mean, there's no way that's going to work. I can't handle that. And things
You want to know
fizzle out.
a great story here? So Rick Hogan, you mentioned Rick Hogan. We know Rick.
Yep.
Rick was, he is a legendary newspaper man for the Tribune, and his father was also the same thing for the Sun Times. And so Rick was sort of a mentor to me. I remember he said, he told me, he's like, he has this very deep voice. If you don't know Rick, very deep voice, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he said, all right, look, um, don't go to grad school and get a journalism degree. If you want a degree in journalism, drive a cab. And that's what he did. He drove a taxi, and he said, you will, and this is interesting, you will learn a lot about human nature. You will learn about human beings and relationships by driving a cab, because you see all types of people and the things that you hear. You think about your taxi driver, not so much these days, or your Uber driver, but
Yeah.
think about your bartender and your barber. Those three people are connected because they hear everything,
Mm-hmm.
everything. So think about that, and that's what really sort of inspired me to do what I'm trying to do now, is that get on the street, talk to people on the ground, and it's all about relationship. That's really what it comes down to. It's about how we're relating to each other, and the effects of that in Chicago. So that's kind of, not, if anyone's watching or listening and has a journalism degree, that's fine, no offense, but the School of Journalism for Rick Hogan was driving a cab.
Well, and Kogan, when I started the print magazine, I sent, I was trying to get some PR behind it, and it was 2000, and I started in 2002 September. So by 2003, like maybe the March, April issue, and I just sent it. I sent it to Surratt. I sent it to different people that were on GN at the time. I think Surratt was on the GN at the time, or I don't know, maybe another station. But I sent it to Kogan because I knew he did some articles, and Judy Roberts knew him and all that. And I sent
Mm-hmm.
it to him, and I didn't hear anything. And then all of a sudden, I get this. I got home from somewhere, and I got a voicemail, and it's unmistakably Rick Kogan on the voicemail. It's 2003. He's like, and it's like noon, and he's like, the first thing, I don't even know who he is. He just leaves a message. What are you still sleeping? It was like noon. I was like, what? This is Rick Kogan. Call me when you wake up. I want to talk to you about this fabulous magazine. I'm like, he doesn't even know me. I wasn't sleeping, but I love it, man.
Oh,
So I called him up. He had me on the show. He bumped all the other guests. I was on for like an hour, I think, with Kogan. I mean, it was the greatest, and he's been real supportive over the years. Just a dynamite guy. I know he's been the same with you, but he's one of those legends that when you're hanging around with him, you don't realize he's a legend. But
right.
when you look at his work and who he's talked with and hung around with, not just buddies with, he's one of those legends, and he's still on WGN radio on Sunday nights, right?
Yeah, he's still on Sunday nights, and it's so important. And this as a musician, to bring up the next generation. And I know that you've had your own mentors as well when it comes to performing and drumming. And I was 22, 23 when I met Rick. He didn't have to talk to me at all, but I just sort of talked about my philosophy, and it was very much in line with his. And he said, of course, let's go to the Goat and let's have some drinks at the Goat, which we would do then subsequently many times over the next few years. Interesting fact about that: we've been out a bunch. I've never seen him excuse himself to go to the bathroom.
Really?
Yeah, he's special. He's special. He's a machine. But it's like
It's all
to be
that
able to
it's all
sit
that
down.
taxi driver training, man.
That's right. You got to get the next fare. To be able to sit down and have a conversation and to really listen to someone who is interested in the business, and it just so happened that we got along really well. So I'll ever forever be in debt to him. And again, like you, especially now when times have changed, and for me, everyone wants a podcast, and I've done some conferences where I speak about podcasting, and I speak to high school students, and high school students will say, all right, like, how do I get like 1,000 to 2,000
Yeah,
listeners right off the bat? I'm just like, you're not going to,
right.
and you don't want to, because if you've never done this before, you're going to screw up. And so make your mistakes when no one's listening, get real good, just like when you're playing some crappy gig, right? Make your mistakes, learn the ropes, and then eventually you'll be playing House of Blues.
Yeah, yeah, or driving in a RV back from Cedar Rapids on a Sunday night at 4 o'clock in the morning. Hey, what fun was that?
So Mike Jeffers and I, by the way, Mike Jeffers, I do love Mike Jeffers. We played in a band for many years. He was the drummer. I played harmonica, and
That's
also
right.
thank you for the. I'm looking at the Facebook page right now, and
Hey,
I'm
man.
looking at myself, a nice still picture of me playing the harmonica in my basement studio. I won't even charge you any royalties for that. So
That's a quality shot.
yeah, last week I played a little harp on the air.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've had some times of we're driving through like a snowstorm, and we're all saying a little prayer, like this is it. You know, there's so much more I wanted to do with my life, and we're gonna kick it after we played Manistee, Michigan, and this is gonna be it. You know, but it was fun. Though that RV was
Coachman.
It was fun times.
The Coachman. That's right. The Coachman retired after we stopped traveling. The Coachman retired. It's still sitting in the driveways.
That's probably a good thing. I remember there was a hole in the floor. I remember like, oh, there's the street, there's the highway. So it wasn't that insulated, but again, we had 7 guys, so it was a good time.
And I always preface it though, we never slept in the Coachman. We always had rooms wherever we played because everybody's like 7 guys. You guys had all your equipment. You slept in the coach. No, we'd pull up and we had rooms, and we'd go into the rooms, and then we come back out, get in the Coachman, and drive to the next gig. But it was very convenient for 7 guys, all of our equipment. And we were tearing it up, man. We were traveling, we were getting out there, and it's just like what you're talking about. I mean, you have to do it. I mean, we got out on the road, we started doing it. Things picked up. We kept getting asked back by colleges. All of a sudden, we're playing in Marquette, Michigan, driving 8.5 hours and selling out that place for 2 nights.
That was a great gig.
Going nuts. Oh my God, it was unbelievable.
That I have a picture of you now that I'm thinking about it from that night. I think it was like 08, 09.
Yeah.
You're playing the drums, and it was like, a college town. And there were so many people there that they just kept coming up on the stage. And after a while, we're like, whatever. And then there's this picture of you're drumming, and there were like 5 people just surrounding your kit, and you're just like, whatever, man. And you're just playing. And that's, that's the kind of stuff you remember. You don't, we had some not so great experiences. We played some small towns in the Midwest, and I remember like you walk in and maybe it's a restaurant and there's 7 guys in a rock band, and it's like 5 o'clock. It's like the Rudy Tooty Fresh and Fruity specials out, and like people are like, what are all these large amplifiers that you're bringing here? So we did plenty of that too, but again, it's the experience, and you got to have that so you can appreciate the big stuff.
That's right. Well, you got to do that to get to the big stuff.
Absolutely.
You can't just automatically walk in and start playing monster truck shows like we used to do with 15,000 people, and and be carted around in a limo afterwards and go to the after show, which was always fun too. So
we did that in Rockford.
We did do that. Yeah, I know. Clear Channel. About that. Clear Channel, man. We were hooked up with Clear Channel there for a minute.
Wow, we are so corporate. We were so corporate.
We were very corporate people. Now we're fighting the man, Mike Steven.
Yeah, as I go prepare my show for WGN Radio. But the podcast is still, it still has the same vibe to it. I always liked the trying to establish the vibe of, hey, I'm just trying to figure this stuff out too. I'm here with you. I'm not, the production value is very high, but I want it to come off as authentic and real. And I hopefully I'm doing that. I mean, we're in year 14.
Yeah.
And I'm going to keep on going.
Well, you are, and I think let's talk a little bit before we jump off the phone here. Of course, we're on the phone with Mike Steven, OutsideTheLoopRadio.com. Outside the Loop every Saturday morning, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 7:20 a.m., streaming everywhere, podcast available. Check it out. It's worth a listen. You can even go back 704 episodes and hear the first one, which probably sounds different than number 704. So,
oh my goodness,
you can hear the development of Mike Steven. But that brings up, I think, in this day and age, since we're talking about podcasts, we're talking about people just doing it. I mean, that's why I started this show, right? I was doing my video show, which started picking up a lot of steam, where I'd have a guest come in. Then I started doing it at the hot dog stand. in
Which is a
Bridgeport.
great idea, by the way. That hot dogs. What was the name of that hot dog stand?
Johnny O's. Johnny O's
Johnny
hot.
O's in Bridgeport. I
Well,
love that.
and I wanted to do a show like that because I mean, I've traveled, I've toured and stuff. I've been on a lot of PBS. Nothing wrong with them at all. Public radio, all of that. But when you walk in, it's a dry studio. You're sitting there. It's just not the same as when a musician is hanging out with another musician at a bar, at a club, or at a hot dog stand, relaxed, just talking.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of vibe I always tried to get. So I just started because I'm like, if you never start, you're never going to get anywhere. And it started picking up steam. And then, of course, we started transforming it. We were going to start doing it over at Epiphany Center for the Arts once that opened up. But out of necessity, we started doing the live show, the daily show here, 11:30 a.m. Chicago Music Revealed, and I'm working through the bugs. I'm getting things. We're getting an audience. People are listening, and people are listening on all the different platforms. And then throughout the day and night, we're getting some good listeners, good views, good comments back. So it's really, you've got to get it started. But the production value, compared to when you started your podcast, which can't even be comparable to what it is now. And then, what I started, just starting it, with my iPhone essentially and a boom mic coming off of it at one point. Then I got upgraded cameras, but I started it, and you have to start it. But I think the production quality now, when kids get out of school, or if they don't go to school, but if they want to do something like this, it's so easy for them to do good production. Then it gets into the content development. I think that's the key, right?
Well, that's the whole thing here is now it's really a lot easier to make it look slick or to sound slick. But if you don't have a message, a story, a compelling discussion, then no one's going to care. So, it's a combination of all this. And I think that, again, you have to keep that in mind, even if you're at the hot dog stand. And what I really like that whole hot dog stand sort of concept, because that's real.
Yep.
It's like you're not trying to create something. It's already created. You're tapping into it. And yes, it's different from like the sterile studio environment, or something that you might see that's really well produced. There's nothing wrong with that stuff. But man, I've taken my show on the road. I've done shows, I've recorded shows from bars, taverns, all over the place. And that's, for me, some of the most incredible favorite things I've ever done, because that's real. Now, it's not practical for me to do that each week because I'm a teacher and I have 2 kids and a wife, and but for me, that's just so much fun because you're sitting around, maybe you're having a beer and you're talking about this topic that's very Chicago with someone else, and there's no pretense. It's very approachable. So I like that, and yeah, I mean, you have to be careful almost not to make it too polished, at least for me, because it's really easy to do.
Well, I think it's also, like you brought up a great point, you get the best story when they're in a relaxed environment. They loosen up. I mean, how many times have you interviewed somebody in the studio and then you interview them again somewhere out and about, and they're chill, they're relaxed, and they're talking more. And that was one of my things with the musicians, especially because they're very guarded. When all of a sudden you turn on a microphone and they're sitting in a studio, they're afraid of everything they're saying. But if they're sitting somewhere where they, that maybe they had a libation or two, and we turn on the camera and we start talking, and they're in a hot dog stand or they're in a bar or wherever they're at, they start telling better stories. And that's the stuff that makes the content that people want to hear, because people don't get to hear those things because people want to be brought inside the scene or inside any sort of industry to find out the ins and outs. But when somebody's guarded, it's different. So that's what, like you doing what you're doing, myself, what I'm doing. Hopefully we're telling those stories and getting stories that we would never hear otherwise from people.
And that's the whole thing. And again, today there is more of that because podcasting is so popular. So there are more outlets where folks are, getting stories out there, which is really great. And it's become a little bit more difficult for me to try to not repeat what's been out there or what's coming out there. And I try to do that. But, like this week, I'm going to talk to the executive director of the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. And this made some news, but they've
got something to talk about. Holy mackerel.
They blew up a smokestack in Little Village, and they basically blew the bottom out, and then the whole thing fell down. and it sent up this giant tidal wave of dust and particles and asbestos and who knows what else. And that was in the news like on Monday, I
I
think,
think
and
you're right.
then
Yeah.
haven't heard a ton about that afterwards. So we're going to talk about. So this woman, Kim Wasserman's her name. She lives in Little Village. She is going to tell her experience of what this was like, why they're ticked off, and the history of how this has been happening in that neighborhood for years. And we don't have that conversation about maybe that particular topic. It's not always going to get front page news. So that's another example of what we're doing on the show.
Yeah, no, 100%. So Mike Steven, Saturday mornings, 6 a.m. to 7 a.m., 7:20 a.m. Outside the Loop Radio, episode 705 coming up this Saturday. And of course, OutsideTheLoopRadio.com. We'll link everything up below. And it was a pleasure catching up with you on the show finally. I know we've threatened to have, I think I threatened to have you at the hot dog stand a couple of years ago, but we didn't make that happen. But I'm glad we at least did it this way. And maybe next time, as I told Lydia Liebman yesterday, the Skype situation will be cured on my technical stuff, and we'll be up and running on Skype next time, and I'll be able to look at you through the camera because we'll still be social distancing. I have a feeling in a couple of months.
Yeah, I think. Oh, we will. And I got to say this: you texted me this morning. You said the Skype's not working. I was going to shower for you. Okay. in these times of self quarantine, that's not always a thing that's top level. Right now, I did not shower.
So Jenny's gonna text me later and yell at me because she thought she had it made. You were gonna actually take a shower.
This was her ticket. I'm wearing my Batman pajamas and a robe right now.
Oh, I wish Skype was working. Oh,
yeah, I know.
Although I think I saw that on the road one time, so I don't know. I might have seen that before.
There's yes, maybe, and also the hair is out of control. The hair, I haven't had a haircut in like 2 months.
As Dave Goldman used to say, you had like 5 pounds of hair on your head. So I'm glad that hasn't changed. That's outstanding.
No, that hasn't changed. Every strand is still there, just out of sight, out of control right now. Well, thanks for having me on, dude. This was a lot of fun. Congrats on this and all the stuff you've got going on.
Yeah, no, let's stay in touch, and we'll continue to cross promote each other, and we'll catch back up on this show hopefully in a couple of months, and we'll get more of a lowdown because you're the guy talking to the people in and out of the community, and I think in a couple of months, so you're going to have a heck of a lot of stories to tell between now and then. So
yeah,
stay safe, stay healthy, and
you too, man.
Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for having me on your show as well.
You got it. Yeah, we'll definitely be in touch. Check out the show, and I love you.
All right, back at you, Mike Steven. Thanks for being on. All right, talk to you. Bye.
All right.
Mike Steven, ladies and gentlemen, he is, it's interesting because he brought up a great point. He started that podcast just because he wanted to start something and do something. They didn't let him do it on WGN radio, and he ended up doing it himself. It grew into quite a monster, and now he's on WGN radio. It took a little while, but I can remember him doing that even when we were on the road with that band with Daytago. We were on the road, and he would do the podcast because he had to do the podcast. He'd be in the back of the RV editing it, mixing it down while we're playing different places in between shows. It's a labor of love at first, then it turns into something, starts growing, and you don't want to stop because if you stop, you never start it again. So during this time, maybe this is a great time for everybody that's watching this. If there's something that you've wanted to do, but you haven't had time to do it and you didn't know how to do it, just start doing it because things start happening because of that. Got a great comment here. We're going to mention a couple of different passings that have happened throughout the week in the music community because of COVID-19. We've had Lee Konitz passed away the other day. I mean, this is not gonna help the music industry because a lot of these musicians, I think we're going to lose a few more as well, as Lydia Liebman and I talked about yesterday. But Dave Katzman passed along. Some very sad news. Sir Walter Scott passed away from COVID-19. He was absolutely one of the best guitar players in the city and, Chicago music royalty. So thanks for Dave Katzman for passing that along. We'll have more information on all of the different people that have passed away here. Maybe on Fridays, maybe I'll do that. Not that I want to turn that into a regular feature because the less things we can talk about in that realm, the better. But sad day, for all of that, Sir Walter Scott passing away from COVID-19. So All right, so tomorrow we're going to have Sean Hinton on. We're going to be talking about a project that he's going to be launching online. He is the guitar player for John Legend, Mary J. Blige, and many others, so that'll be interesting. I'm sure we're going to have a great conversation. And then next week, we are going to announce some exciting new guests. We're going to be branching into different music genres. And of course, please pass this along, share it along. If you have somebody that you think that I should connect with, let me know. We're looking to do that. Of course, thanks to the Epiphany Center for the Arts for helping to present this show every single day. Epiphany Center for the Arts is going to be opening as soon as we get the okay. It is a fantastic facility. 1885, the church was built. The school building / community center was built in 1950s. 3 different venues, live music and events. It's going to be incredible. So I can't wait to show everyone that. We'll do some shows from over there once we can get the go-ahead to get back in there. But thanks to Epiphany Center for the Arts, epiphanychi.com for all the information there. And, of course, you can pick up this show and all of the past shows. This is episode 12. We're going to be doing episode 13 tomorrow. And it's going to be, is it 13 or 14? I don't know. I'll figure it out by tomorrow. But either way, all of the episodes are up on chicagomusicrevealed.com. They're on our Chicago Jazz Audio Experience podcast and on chicagojazz.com. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, of course, everywhere. It is all posted and archived so you can check everything out. Please share. Please comment. As I always say, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, call the grandkids. 11:30 a.m. Chicago Music Revealed. I will see you back here tomorrow, and hopefully I'll see you out on the scene sometime in person soon. But if not, I will see you on the next broadcast tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Thanks for watching.